The views and opinions expressed by guests on this podcast do not necessarily represent those of the podcast, its host, or sponsors. If you would like to discuss the murder in your family on this podcast, please be sure to visit themurderinmyfamily.com for more information. You can support this podcast by visiting patreon.com/themurderinmyfamily. This episode may contain unsettling material or subject matter. Listener discretion is advised.
Thank you for joining me for episode 67 of The Murder in My Family. I'm your host, Mike Morford. In this episode, we'll be discussing the case of a 36-year-old father and husband who was gunned down on a Dallas, Texas street in February 1980. His killer and the motive for his murder remains a mystery 40 years later. We'll get into this case after some quick housekeeping. Independent podcasts like this one depend on word of mouth to bring in new listeners. So if you find that you enjoy this podcast, please take a minute to rate it and review it wherever you listen to your podcast. And be sure to introduce a friend to the show and invite them to listen. With your help, The Murder in My Family can continue to grow and reach a new audience. To learn more about the show or the cases we discuss, please visit themurderinmyfamily.com. You can also find us on Twitter with the handle @MurderInMyFam, or by searching for The Murder in My Family podcast on Facebook. If you'd like to support this show through a Patreon donation, it's always appreciated, and you can do so by visiting patreon.com/The Murder in My Family. Benefits of supporting the show on Patreon include early access to ad-free episodes of the show, plus bonus content not heard in regular episodes. Support may also include thank you cards, stickers, and more. If you prefer to, you can also support the show through a PayPal donation by visiting paypal.me/The Murder in My Family. In each episode, I'll give shoutouts to any new supporters. In this episode, I'd like to thank Gypsy Sethman, and thank you to all of the supporters that generously donate and help keep the show growing and improving. One more note before we get started. Please consider supporting any of the sponsors that you hear on The Murder in My Family, the way that those sponsors support the show. It's with our sponsors' support that the show can go on and continue to provide a platform to share these stories with you in every episode. Thank you, and now on with the show. Today's case is a challenging one. It's about a 1980 Texas murder that seems to have gotten very little attention from the press, and therefore, gathering material to tell this story proved tough. That's something I often face in covering older cases. But just because a case is old or hasn't been well documented, doesn't mean that the victim at the center of it doesn't deserve to have their story told. Leland Allen was born on June 22, 1943, in Delta County, Texas, to Quentin and Neva Allen. He was the couple's only child. The family resided in Cooper, a small town 80 miles east of Dallas. The population was less than 3,000 people. Cooper was, and still is, the kind of town where everyone knows everyone else, and Friday night high school football brings the town together. Leland had pearl blue eyes and red hair that he always made sure was combed back neatly. He was a fixture on the streets of Cooper, Texas, where he grew up. Always being a husky boy and heavier than his friends, they gave him the nickname Fat Boy. Many people might be angry or upset over receiving such a nickname, but Leland didn't mind it. In the 1950s and 60s in small-town Texas, people found humor, friendship, and bonding in many ways. The happy and outgoing Leland could always be counted on to make people laugh, and he easily made friends. Leland attended Cooper High School in his hometown. Leland fell in love with Linda Hennon, another Cooper native. In May of 1963, the young couple got married. A year later, in May 1964, they welcomed their first child, Christy. In September 1967, their second child, a son named Barry, was born. The young family regularly attended Friday night football games, and then went to fish fries after. Life was good for the Allen family in their small town. Christy and Barry looked up to their dad, who they viewed as a big teddy bear. As friendly as Leland was, people also knew that he could have a temper at times. To support his young and close-knit family, Leland worked several jobs in a variety of fields, including truck driving, farming, and even a stint as a sheriff's deputy. Although there wasn't much crime in Cooper, the town wasn't immune from it. In 1979, word began to spread that a used car lot there was the front for a stolen car and chop shop ring. Some of the names being thrown around as being connected to the illegal activities were known to most, since everyone in the town knew each other. It was around that time that Leland gave up his sheriff's deputy job and went to work as a truck driver for the Armstrong Trucking Company out of Garland, Texas. The money was good, but the days were long for Leland. He would leave very early in the morning and get home late at night. His routes typically took him 80 miles away to Dallas and back. To save him the long trip back to Cooper late at night, friends of Leland that lived in Dallas would sometimes let him sleep at their place. When Leland had downtime there, he would spend time in one particular bar drinking beers. Many times Leland would carry large amounts of cash with him. Many truckers might be nervous doing that, but Leland was a big and imposing man, so he didn't fear getting robbed. Around that time, attacks on truckers seemed to be happening more frequently than normal. It was one of Leland's trips to Dallas that would forever change his family's lives. Late on the night of February 12, 1980, Leland was in Dallas on one of his trips. While standing outside of his car that he kept there, on Lombardy Lane, someone driving by in a car opened fire on Leland. A witness heard the shots and looked out his window. They saw the car with the shooter in it make a U-turn before heading back towards Leland and firing more shots. Neighbors called police, but none of them got a good look at the shooter or the vehicle. When police arrived, it was too late. Leland was lying on the ground dead in front of his running car. He had been shot several times. Police were tasked with the uneasy job of contacting Leland's family back in Cooper to let them know he was dead. The crime seemed random. Police couldn't pinpoint a motive. Theories abound, however. One road over from where Leland was shot down in Dallas, a chop shop stolen car ring was broken up and arrests were made. The people arrested had ties to the ring that was discovered in Leland's hometown of Cooper. Some people wondered if Leland himself could be involved with the ring, and his murder was somehow connected to that activity to silence him. Another theory was that Leland was having an affair with the bartender at his favorite Dallas bar, the one that he would often drink beers at, and that her husband had killed Leland out of jealousy or revenge. The couple, who were a full 10 years younger than 36-year-old Leland, had been married less than 6 months when he was killed. Both of them were investigated, and at least one of them was polygraphed. It's not known what the official position is of investigators surrounding this couple. As I mentioned at the very beginning of this episode, details of this case are very sketchy. If you Google it, you won't find much. Since police haven't publicly commented on the case or provided updates, it's not known if DNA or any other evidence exists that can solve this case one day. Whatever the truth is, Leland's family wants to know why he had to die so violently. They want answers and deserve justice. Leland's daughter Christy, who still lives in the small town of Cooper, is still trying to find out the truth. She sat down with me to discuss her father's case. That conversation is coming up in just a moment. Is there something that interferes with your happiness? Is something preventing you from achieving your goals? I know there's been times when I wanted to go out and do something, but didn't make it because things I had on my mind kept me from doing what I wanted to do. If you find yourself in a similar situation, then BetterHelp Online Counseling just might be the right solution for you. BetterHelp will assess your needs and match you with your own licensed professional therapist. You can connect in a safe and private online environment. It's so convenient, and you can start communicating with a counselor in under 24 hours. This isn't self-help. It's professional counseling. Send a message to your counselor anytime. You'll get timely and thoughtful responses. Plus, you can schedule weekly video or phone sessions, all without having to sit in an uncomfortable waiting room. And BetterHelp can assist you with so many things, from depression, stress, and anxiety, to family conflicts, sleep issues, and more. Anything you share is confidential. And while BetterHelp is not a crisis line, it is convenient, professional, and affordable. In fact, so many people have been using BetterHelp that they are recruiting additional counselors in all 50 states. I want you to start living a happier life today. As a listener of the Murder My Family, you'll get 10% off your first month by visiting BetterHelp.com/family. Join over 1 million people taking charge of their mental health. Once again, go to BetterHelp, That's HELP.com/family, and you'll save 10% on your first month of BetterHelp. A crime is like a puzzle. Each connection helps reveal the big picture, and it's a thrill to put it all together. When I'm not thinking about true crime, my brain still craves a challenge. That's why I love Best Fiends. If you aren't playing Best Fiends, you're missing out. Big time. It's the fun and exciting puzzle adventure you can experience anytime, anywhere. You don't even need an internet connection to play. No Wi-Fi, no worries. What I like most about playing Best Fiends is that you're constantly thinking of ways to improve your play and learning little tricks, and I'm always finding cool new characters. My wife also plays, and together, her and I have a friendly little competition going. We used to keep track of who's ahead, but now we just like to see who can get to a new level fastest. There are over 100 million downloads of this exciting game. Trust me, you don't want to miss out on all the fun. Best Fiends updates the game monthly with new levels and events, so it never gets old. Best Fiends has thousands of levels already, with new levels, events, and characters added every month. It's hours of fun right at your fingertips, and you can play offline. With over 100 million downloads and tons of 5-star reviews, Best Fiends is a must-play. Download Best Fiends free on the Apple App Store or Google Play. That's friends without the R. Best Fiends. Hi, Christy, and thanks for coming on to discuss your father Leland's case with us.
Hello. It's nice to meet you.
I'm glad to have you here and talk about your father's case. It's going on, 40 years now. You were only 15 when he was murdered in 1980. I think for any young person to lose a parent, that's tough, but to lose one in such a violent way, I imagine, was especially tough for you and your family.
It really was. I had a brother. He was only 12 at the time. And we were all very family oriented and were close. And it was just devastating and such a life altering event. It just something we never even heard of, much less thought would ever happen to us.
And this is a small town that you were living in, that you grew up in, where you weren't used to that kind of stuff happening, I assume.
Oh, yes. We live in a little small town. It's called Cooper, Texas. It's 80 miles east of Dallas. We have 2,500 people at the time, maybe. My graduating class had one of the biggest classes they had had in years, and I think we had between 40 and 50 people. Like I said, we just a little bitty small town, country farming town. Everybody knows everybody. You didn't see anybody on the street you didn't know, and the biggest thing going around was a Friday night football game. And it's just a really small town. I was raised here. I've never lived anywhere else, and so had my dad and my mom. We have always lived here, grew up here, and I continue to live here today.
So I imagine this was a shocking thing when this happened. When everyone that knows everyone sees a crime like this happen, it's got to make waves in that town.
It did for everyone. Things like that just don't happen here. You don't hear of hardly any kind of crime. I mean, much less murder. That's just something no one even, around here would even think to happen. Those kind of things happen not to your family, and especially not in a town like ours. And it for a very long time, it was, the big, what happened, and how could this happen? And but we never really got answers because it didn't happen right here in this town. And when you get out of our little web, you realize that in the bigger world, you're not quite as important as you were right here in your town. So it was a shock. It was devastating when he was killed. Just getting to the prime of his life as an adult, and it was just my brother, myself, and my mom and dad, and it just turned our world upside down. I mean, it changed. Our lives changed in every way.
And if you can, would you be able to tell us a little bit about your dad? What kind of person he was? Maybe share some of your memories of him with us.
Oh yeah. And I have a brother now, and he is so much like my dad, even favors him. And everyone says that. But and all I have, of course, are photos from long ago. But my dad was a really hefty guy. He was way over 300 pounds. He was heavy. In fact, a lot of his old high school friends called him Fat Boy. He was red-headed, but that hair would be, every hair on his head was perfect, combed back with that hairspray like back in the day. And he had blue eyes that looked like pearl blue. And you never met a funnier person in your life. He always had something funny to say, always joking, jovial, just a happy-go-lucky, fun guy. I mean, we went on vacations, just, like everyone. We would go to Arkansas. We would go to, Arkansas and Galveston are the two main things I always remember. But he loved to go, to the Friday night football games. We didn't have anybody playing, but he would always, want to go and be, he loved football and loved watching football on TV. And we had friends here in this town. He did that, a man and woman that were family friends, and they had kids that were our age. And every Friday or Saturday night, we had fish fry every Friday and Saturday night out at their barn. All of us kids ran around till midnight playing with lightning bugs and outside while they all sat around the fire and had drinks and fried fish. And anytime you mentioned my dad's name to anybody, they knew him. And to this day, you can mention, oh, Leland, yeah, Fat Boy, and sure do miss him. He was just a fun-loving, big teddy bear guy.
Wow. I
never saw him. He did have a temper, but anybody that you ever mentioned him to, he was just a familiar face and a fun, smiling guy most of the time.
It sounds like you have a lot of fond memories, and he was well known and well liked. But of course, in 1980, that all came to an end. And what's sad about your dad's case is it's largely forgotten online. We talked a little bit before I started recording. There's barely a mention on there, and I know probably part of that's because you're in a small town. Had this happened maybe right in the big city or something, it would have made more news. But I know that you didn't want your father's case to be forgotten and his murder to be forgotten. But can you walk us through the case as far as you understand it, how it unfolded and how it played out?
Sure. And sometimes it doesn't seem like, and it sure doesn't seem like it's been 40 years ago. I mean, it doesn't seem like yesterday, but it's so funny how you can remember details of things that happened so long ago, just like it just happened. In 1980, I was a sophomore in high school, and I was a twirler, and my dad was always, so proud of me, and because he loved the football, and he drove a truck for Armstrong Containers at the time in 1980. But previously, in 78 or 79, he became a Delta County deputy sheriff. Before then, he was a farmer. We farmed. We had land. He farmed cotton and soybeans and just everything a farmer does. And when that kind of slowed down, he had a friend that was the sheriff here, and another real good friend that was the deputy. And my father became a deputy sheriff here in this town. And you ask anybody here now that knew him, they're like, oh my gosh, when a man named Benny Fisher and Joe Donald Menard were the sheriff and deputy sheriff, and my dad, which was Leland, was a sheriff. They just have fun memories of when they would be in town and they would be asked, talk to them and how they could, they just made everybody feel safe, but knew they were taken care of. 79, I think, there was a little used car lot here in town that sold some used cars. And there was an investigation going on that possibly they had gotten word that there was what they called a chop shop being run out of that little car lot. There were several people that names that I was familiar with that were involved in that, and that's when my dad was a deputy sheriff. So in 1979, that started. But in the meantime, my dad's real good friend, Bobby Huey, drove a truck for Armstrong Container in Dallas and, told my dad, hey, you want to make better money and get out, why don't you come and drive with us? And so my dad started to drive a truck for Armstrong Container in Dallas. That is, like I said, it's 80 miles from here. And a lot of the trips that my dad was doing weren't really long haul that took 2 or 3 days. They would be like short haul trips, but he had to be there really early in the morning and maybe didn't get home till really late at night. So we had friends that were from here that were managing some apartments there in Dallas and had some extra room. So when my dad would come in late or have to go early, instead of driving all the way 80 miles home, which would make it even later, or have to get up hours earlier, he would actually stay in Dallas with our friends. So, and my dad made, good money driving a truck, and a lot of times he carried a lot of cash with him. After he would finish his work a lot, they liked to go by a bar, have a drink. He liked to drink beer. I never saw my dad drink any hard liquor, just beer. Evidently, there was a lady maybe there he became familiar with, and I'm not sure, there were talk that maybe he had a relationship with. I did know, I do have her name. Her name at the time was, she was quite a bit younger, but she worked there at the bar, and had evidently become friendly or more than friendly with my dad. My dad was, him and my mom were still married, and there was never, I was 15. If there was any thing that was happening between my dad and mom at that time, I did not know about it. So anyway, he had met this lady, which she did have a boyfriend that she had had for quite some time, and his name was, they were just boyfriend, girlfriend at the time. I think they were several years younger than my dad. They may have been in their early 30s, late 20s. My dad was, like I said, 38. And they had met, and I think from what I had overheard from a friend of mine, which I mentioned earlier was Bobby Huey, they had a son, Mark, which is, he and I were like brother and sister. And he did tell me that one night he did hear my dad and his dad talking about an incident that had happened just a couple of weeks prior to my dad being killed, that my dad was driving the truck on the interstate there in Dallas and had been shot at. The truck had been shot at. At that time, there was a lot going on with trucks being shot at different times. Just like things going on now with the rioting, there were a lot of incidents with trucks being shot at. So really, we knew about it. We didn't think it was anything personal. We thought it was just people doing what they do. And but my father and Bobby Huey were overheard talking about this and how he needs to stay away from there before something bad happens. And so I don't know, at that point, what was overheard, we didn't hear details other than evidently Bobby thought something was going on that, may lead into something worse, and really, kind of begged my dad, please don't go back down there. So evidently, Bobby was thinking that some of that may had something to do with her. And from the report that was about 2 weeks prior to my dad being shot. After that, my dad did, I think, talk to this girl again. And in the report, they did pick up the boyfriend, which was, they picked him up twice, and did interview him and do a polygraph, which they said he did pass. And I'm kind of backtracking now. But when this happened on February the 13th, my dad was shot and killed. He was shot multiple times. And if you remember, I was mentioning the chop shop that was going on here in Delta County that they were a big investigation on. My dad was killed on a street in Dallas called Lombardy Lane, which on one side's kind of residential, one side was kind of industrial, but not big back in the 80s. On the corner of Lombardy, and I would have to look up the name of the street, but there was a huge garage there, like a garage like you do mechanic work out of. And that's where my dad was killed. He was killed on the Lombardy Lane, which was right in the cross section of the other street in Lombardy, where this big garage sat. My dad was actually out of the car about 50 feet in front of our vehicle. The vehicle was still running with the headlights on, like he knew who he was getting out. He was getting out of our vehicle to talk with someone that he knew. Because he, like I said, he was about 50 feet in front of our vehicle, laying in the street, and had been shot multiple times. So it wasn't, to me, like someone walked up to the car and shot him, or it just seemed like to me that it was somebody he was familiar with, or that knew him or knew something about him that he knew enough to get out and speak with. And like I said, on the corner of where he was shot in the big garage, come to find out, a lot in that particular garage, there was a big bust for someone running a chop shop. And a lot of the people that were associated with that chop shop were associated with the individuals here in Delta County. And I think that's just a little much. I mean, when you don't live in Dallas and you are shot and killed in a neighborhood right in front of a building full of people that you have been somehow associated with or had knowledge of, when we live 80 miles away, I don't think it's just irony that he just happened to be killed on that very street. There was several other people that were suspects. They had listed several people that had been involved with this chop shop that were also connected to the chop shop here in Cooper that could have been involved in the murder just to either keep my dad from talking or just because he knew too much. Maybe he was involved. I don't know. But there was also mention of one man that was an actually hit man that had been picked up for other murders or attempted murders in the past. And but in my dad's report, he was never picked up or talked to regarding my dad. The only person that I saw was ever mentioned, there was one other couple, a man and woman, that they had some suspicion on. I think they talked to him, but I'm not sure they were ever brought in and even interrogated or talked to or interviewed. They kind of just said that it was meaningless. But when my dad was shot on Lombardy Lane that night, around midnight, there was a house. Like I said, one side was kind of just a neighborhood, a residential, and there was a house that two men and one of their sons lived in. And those individuals did hear the shots. They got up, they looked out, they saw a car. They saw my dad's car was still running in the road. They saw another car drive off from where evidently my dad was shot, go down to the next intersection, come back, and fired more shots at my dad. They kind of described the car, and one of the individuals in this report happened to have a car kind of like that, but nothing was ever followed up on. Pretty much after a while, and after they talked to this a couple of times, it just went cold. They and the Dallas Police Department's answer to me was they just had so many other cases to work on, and in fact, in the report at one point, the investigator is writing, and he's like, they had to stop what they were doing because they had another call out, and it just kind of got dropped. I mean, there was so much going on regarding this. I would really like to have known, with somebody, how could they get away with this? And there'd be so much other, it wasn't just like a random shooting from just from what I'm reading. And I'm in no way any type of law enforcement or criminal investigator. This is just from my own reading. And in fact, the same day that my dad's obituary came out in the local paper, there was also an article in the very same paper about this chop shop that had been arrest made that was connected to the one here in Dallas and the one here in Cooper. And but once again, Dallas is a big city. I just don't think my dad being shot, shot on any other street it might have been just happening, but him just being shot on a street where there were people that had ties to our town it's too ironic for me to just let go. And the people, that they had kind of thought maybe she had set him up because the boyfriend was jealous, and she knew he would be on that street because he did know those people and had connections with that chop shop. So they said she had agreed to meet him there, and because he evidently was standing on the passenger side of the car when he was shot, and that somebody maybe come out of the bushes and shot him, and then they drove off, that maybe she had him set up, or because she knew he was going to be at that place at that time and had agreed to meet her, and he had got out of his car to go up and talk to her and leaned into the car, and that's just a lot of speculation. Like I said, I have crime scene photos of my dad laying in the highway there, shot multiple times. And they did take the thing that they did not take. He had a watch, and he had several things on him that they did not take, but they did take his billfold. The only way that any family member could identify him is we had a great aunt that lived in Dallas at the time, and she had been very ill, and my dad had her address and phone number in his pocket, and they had taken the crime scene photos to her, and she identified him because they had taken his billfold, his wallet. They took his wallet, and when I was looking at the crime scene photos, of course, back in 1980, there wasn't the DNA and all the technology that they have now. And I know that. But when I was looking at the crime scene photos, my dad was, like I said previously when I was talking, he was a really big guy. I never saw my dad wear a pair of tennis shoes. He wore boots, a button-up shirt, and I don't know, the Western kind of knit pants that would zip and button. They were just kind of cowboy cut, but they were knit and stretchy. On the crime scene photos, I zoomed in on one of the pictures, and on the picture, you can see where they got my dad's billfold out of his back pocket. His pocket's untucked, and the button is actually laying there on the ground. It and I would like to have known, there may have been DNA on those pants from them. Because like I said, DNA wasn't big back then, so I'm sure they didn't have gloves and all that. Whoever did it and just took his billfold. He didn't have that much money, but he did have some. But as far as I know, the wallet was never found. My mom had to go through canceling all the credit cards and everything. We never got any of that information back. And for so long, we had FBI, a lot of surveillance around our house due to the fact that whoever got it did have our address and, a lot of information about our family. And, we had a lot of prank phone calls. We had a lot of investigators calling us a lot, reporters. It was just something like you see on TV that we didn't even know anything about. I mean,
just to back up for 1 second. So this is all this stuff is going on, and you've got all these calls and stuff coming in, and your world is really imploding with all this stuff. It sounds like.
Really, really scary. My brother and I was 15. We'd come home from school, and there would be cars parked around our little neighborhood, and you're, is it, and, we would think, is that people trying to take care of us? Or, every time when we would leave, it was, is somebody watching us, or are they going to, what happened? What made this happen? Are we going to be next? Are they want to take out his family? Who knows what, because we had no answers to anything. We didn't know, if it was trying to take out our family or, really who it was. Was it a friend? Was it a friend that turned on him? Was it someone that knew that maybe my dad had told my mom something about? What, were we going to be next? And so, it was very scary for me and my brother and my mom. My mom was a school teacher. And, for us to have to, when the phone would ring and it would be investigators or it would be newspaper reporters and continual questions. And it was really scary. It was a really, really scary time for a long time. It makes you really wary of just going to your car or running to the store. And at the time, I don't realize, I guess, how scary it must have been for my mom, because I'm still a teenager, and a lot of those questions didn't even enter my mind, because that was just, you don't think about those kind of things. But I'm sure it did to my mom. And I'm sure there's a lot of things. My mom is probably one. No, I'm not going to say one. I'm going to say my mom is the strongest person I've ever known. I can't remember a time when, during all that, she made us fearful. She was such a strong person, and to get through this. My mom had health problems. She had a brain aneurysm just a year before. She was a school teacher. She had me and my brother by herself, and I just can't remember a time she didn't ever make us feel safe, or that she would fall apart and make us feel like that this wasn't going to be okay. And I think that for so many years, I think, and for so long, she got us through all that for so long, when you don't see your parent falling apart over it, what I'm saying is, I think she dealt with it totally different, than letting us see her not be strong.
Yeah, and strong for you.
Yeah, so she's being strong for us.
Okay. And,
there was lots of things, but she didn't want that worry on us. She didn't want that fear on us. She had, she took all of it and, dealt with it and never had my brother or myself, have to have any of those worries. We went on, we played every sport. I was a twirler. We just lived a normal life. She made sure we had everything we needed, and, just that we were that we were safe and, everything was going to be okay. One thing I didn't mention just a little bit ago was that was talked to, that they kind of thought maybe it set him up in this, the boyfriend that they did interview. I did find out that those two that were boyfriend and girlfriend had eventually married. Even if there was something going on with my dad, I don't know, but these two people did marry, and they are still married today. I even, after just a couple of years ago, found out where they live, and it's only about 50 miles from me, and they are still married to this day. And I think that's one thing that really bothers is that, what did they know, even if they weren't involved and that wasn't the way it went? Now, I feel like they knew more than was ever told, because if there was some kind of relationship between her and my dad, I think there's a lot more information from them than they ever got. And like I said, who am I to? I mean, I did my own little investigation and found these people and know where they live today. And I've even I don't know how to put it. I did at one time on Facebook try to ask them a couple of questions to get in contact with me, and neither one will. They won't even acknowledge me. So, like I said, I know that those two individuals can shed some light on some of this. But I don't want to just on my own be the one to confront them. And there was a lot of talk for a long time, when all this did happen was, we don't know what we're going to start digging in and what we may come up with and who doesn't want to know to be found out. It's been a lot of years. These people got away with things for a long time. Are they going to be, how are they going to be now if things start coming up? And, my answer to that is, I just want some answers. And if that's what it takes, I'm 50 years old now. I'm an adult and I can handle it. And, whatever, God will take care of me if that's what needs to be. But I just, I would just like to know, what kind of people did do this? Was it people that he knew that turned on him, or was it literally irony? Just for my peace of mind.
It's a lot to really unpack, because you have a lot of possibilities. It could be a case of jealousy. It could be something connected to the chop shop. It seems like there's a lot of different scenarios,
right,
and a lot of things that you question in your mind. Is it this? Is it that? Could it have been this other thing? That's got to be tough to deal with all of that.
Right, and even now, there are several individuals that were listed in that report that have since passed away. It's been 40 years, Some of them have since passed away, but quite a few of them are still alive. And maybe it did go, I'm sure they have information, and maybe they don't want to be found out at this point. But, my thing is, I've lived my whole life without my dad. I'd like to at least know, for my peace of mind, what happened? What happened that night? Valentine's Day. It was midnight on the 13th, right at Valentine's Day. So there's not a Valentine's Day that goes by that's not the only thing I think of. And another thing, why with this person being involved, if they did have some type of relationship, maybe, since it was Valentine's, were they trying to meet up? And, it's just a lot of things you start thinking about, and there's so much information that it could have been looked into. That at the end of this report, when I talked to someone at Dallas PD, they said, I think they finally just determined it was a road rage. And my dad's out of the vehicle 50 feet in front of the car on a residential area, in front of a place that is being run by convicts associated with our town. Now, I'm not real smart, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't road rage.
When the police started investigating this, I guess first off, did the big city, the Dallas police, are they the ones that officially investigated it?
Yes, the report I have is from the Dallas Police Department. I actually went to Dallas, the Lee Sterrick Division Center there in Dallas, and got the police report. The investigators were from Dallas. Their names are both in this report. I think maybe the sheriff or one of the deputies did make some calls there to do the talk with them since they were friends or whatever. But of course, a lot of that information I don't have. And the guy that was the sheriff that my dad worked under, that was his real good friend, and the other deputy, they've both passed away since then. But a lot of the people that they were associated with have not. And, of course, Bobby, I mentioned earlier, a man named Bobby Huey, was my dad's very best friend, that was overheard talking to my dad, stating, please don't go back down there. I've always felt like he had a little more information about what really was going on also, but he's never talked to me about it.
It's got to be a frustrating feeling to have.
It really is, because you see people, in this town, like I said, we knew everybody, and you see people, and then you hear people's name brought up, and you're like, I think they'll say, I always thought that so-and-so had something to do with this. And I just feel like if there'd have been, even back in the day, without the DNA and without other things, with a really thorough investigation, I really feel like we could have had some answers.
Yeah, and 40 years is a long time to wait for answers and to try and get some kind of, not that there's closure, but to get maybe some peace of some kind.
Yeah.
And, there's a lot of stuff that is just lost to time, unfortunately, in these old cases. You mentioned people passing away and people that might have known stuff are getting up there in age. Maybe they don't remember stuff. But if there's maybe a positive, is that so much time has passed. Maybe people that know something that wouldn't talk back then are willing to talk now because they're not afraid, because maybe the person they were afraid of back then has passed away or something. So maybe that will work in your favor.
And that's what I've always, and that's what I've thought, and I think, like I said, my mom was so strong back then and didn't want my brother and I, to know more than we, at the end, I didn't even know anything about this other lady, did not know until just a few years ago that there was a possibility of another woman involved. I mean, that's not things you want you don't need your children to know. And she kept all that. There was just things I didn't know that maybe back then, being young, maybe it really would have bothered me. Maybe my dad having an affair or whatever. But, as I'm gotten older, the thing about it, that I still, that's not something I would be proud of, but that's something I can handle now as an adult. I mean, before when I was 15, maybe there would have been a lot of things I wouldn't understand and couldn't understand. You didn't want to hear that your dad was involved with another woman, or that your dad was involved in maybe something criminal. I don't know. He could be. I don't know. But as an adult at this point, whatever it is, I've learned to accept that. All I want to know is, how did he end up dead, and why did he end up being the one that was killed, whether it was over another woman or whether it was over too much knowledge or how involved he was. Somebody got away with his murder.
And even if he wasn't perfect, even if he had some involvement in a chop shop or something like that, that doesn't mean that you don't want to know who took his life.
That's right. It doesn't constitute any, no life should be taken by another individual. No, unless there's threat, to your immediate family, or, self-defense. But, like I said, I do watch a lot of ID, and I've I watch a lot of things like that, and it takes someone else's life, maybe that person wasn't a good person, but to their family, they were still loved. And, like I said, my dad, I'm sure, had faults, but whatever it was, didn't constitute somebody having the right to kill him and get away with it. I mean, like I said, my life was changed. Our lives were changed forever. My brother grew up without a dad and without a father figure, and he's had a lot of issues in the past. He's dealt with things a lot worse than I have, as far as the things, the way he's dealt with things, the way I've dealt with things have been totally different. And I think our lives would have been much different had we still had him. Even if something had happened between him and my mom, we would have still had our dad. And that's why I just, there's somebody out there that got to live their life. And I don't know why, that he didn't.
Yeah, there's a real ripple effect that when something like this happens, not just the person that loses their life is gone, but then all of a sudden their family, is affected for the rest of their life, and their lives are never the same,
right.
And their outcomes are never the same as they would have been had they had that person in their life. So you never know what that does.
You really don't. You don't know how it affects and not just for a year or two. I mean, it's the rest of your life. Whether your mom remarries or whether, it's your whatever the situation is, the effect it has on you never goes away. You always, it's always in the back of your mind, and especially if you never had any closure, never had any kind of answer, and everything is, always been so up in the air. At this point, I would love to see see the person that did it, actually did it, have to pay the price for it. But at this point, my main objective to this is for my peace of mind. I just want to know, now how could this have happened, and why did it just get dropped like it did, and why can we not have just some kind of answer other than, well, my dad was murdered, and that's all anybody knows.
Where does the case stand today? Are they actively investigating, or do they stay in touch with you to say, hey, this is what we're doing, or is it just forgotten?
I tried for months to even get the, it took me, I don't even know how, 6 months or more, a year to even get police report. You can't get anyone, and then when at Dallas Police, and when you finally do, they transfer you to here. It was just a madhouse trying to get in touch with anybody that would even try to help me. And I finally, I had to pay for these reports, and I went and picked those up. And then I talked to one guy in a cold case division that just, pretty much his answer was, I'm sorry. There's just not much we can do. I mean, they're not going to, from what I don't know how to get it reopened. I don't know how to get it restarted. I don't know, and I tried to tell them, look, I've got there's so much in these reports with these names and these people, there could be things that, we could go back and look at, and maybe people you didn't talk to then, that the people that lived in the house that saw the car go down and come back and turn around, maybe there's something they remember. They were never talked to except for that one night, the night that it happened. Nobody ever went back and talked to them, from what I understand. It was just so unimportant to me, the way it was handled. And I don't know how, we're not rich by any means, and I can't just spend an overabundance of money hiring people, to get this started back. And I really don't know what the channels to go through to do it. My first thing when I reached out was the people telling me, maybe try to get the podcast and get it back out there in the public. And now I don't give up at the Dallas Police Department. I call them ever so often and just even though they keep telling me, well, I just don't know, there's just not, the evidence thing was flooded one time and I can't get a direct answer on where the evidence is. And so it's just so frustrating. I mean, it's just like you hit a brick wall and you don't know where to go without a lot of money to get something started.
It sounds like you've got a really frustrating situation on your hands trying to dig this stuff up and do it all on your own. It sounds like you can use some help and maybe people out there listening might have some ideas. They can reach out to you. Do you have any kind of Facebook page set up about the case?
I don't. I mean, I just have my personal Facebook page. I would like to set up. I have been thinking. I think I may set up one and get it started. That's something I had never really thought about doing. No one's ever even mentioned maybe I should do that. I did go on a member of a cold case group, and I'm member of a couple of groups, but I don't have just a page for him, and that may be something I need to do.
Yeah, and the reason I say that is because a lot of people, if you have a page up there for him, people in your area might see it and start sharing it, and people in Dallas might see it and start sharing it, and then the right person might see it and say, I think I remember something about that case. So-and-so was talking about it. You never know if someone's going to come forward with a piece of information when it gets shared around in your area. So that might be something you might want to start up. And just
that's a really good idea. I think I'll start working on that.
A lot of people do it. They do a whatever you want to call it, justice for so and so, or who murdered so and so, whatever you want to call it. Maybe put some names, some articles, some pictures of him, and details. So people start sharing that in your area, and it spreads around, and the right people hear it. And for example, if you got it published and made a page out of it, you could send me the link, and I'll put it in the show notes, so that anyone that listens to the episode, they can click to your page and follow it and maybe give you advice if they have any kind of tips or anything of how to pursue it.
I think that'll be a very good idea.
Yeah, that's what a lot of people
do.
And
I will get that done.
It's a good way to just sort of spread awareness of the case, and people will share it, and hopefully it just gets in front of the right person. Close out. It sounds like they really need probably to take some kind of fresh look at the case through fresh eyes with maybe modern technology and DNA, maybe going back and questioning old witnesses, whatever the case may be. It's just a question of getting the ball rolling to get that going so they can do that.
Right. And that's where I've I had worked on it for so long. I didn't work for 2 years. And during those 2 years, I really tried to stay on top of it and just worked so hard trying to find answers and going back and looking people up in the report just to kind of track them down and just doing all I could do on my own. And then I eventually had gone back to work, and I haven't been able to just spend every day, doing that. But there's so much just in a little time that I found out on my own. I know that a police, an investigator or the police department, they have the capability to find a heck of a lot more than I do just on my own. All I have is, what I have on the internet or, and looking that kind of things, that doing my own little personal investigation on my own. And I can't, I don't have access to a lot of things that I know police officers would. And I just feel like if they would, if they could get it back out there and look into that again, that they have so much more capability of, I found these people where they live, the street they live on, because I have names, dates of birth, everything you need to find those people. And it didn't take me long to find them and know that is the exact right people. That I know the police officers, could find those people, and it's the ones that I don't know that were at the house that night that saw that little car drive away. If they had gone back and talked to those people, maybe there would have been something they could have told them. I just want to get something started that somebody might know something that we could go with.
Well, 40 years is definitely a long time to wait, and I hope that you do get the answers you've been searching for so long.
Well, I just really appreciate you reaching out to me and wanting to do a podcast. Like I said, it's not something I had ever thought about until just recently when I went on to one of the sites and kind of told my story and asked for help and where I should go. And several of the members suggested that. So I feel like I'm farther along now than I was. And, I appreciate any help anybody is willing to give me or, listen to our story. I mean, I think it's kind of interesting, and it's really, I watch a lot on TV, and I've seen some that are that old that have been solved, and I just wish and pray someday that maybe that's me.
Thank you once again for joining me for this episode of The Murder of My Family. Please, if you have any information about the murder of Leland Allen, contact the Dallas, Texas Cold Case Squad at 877-373-TIPS. We'll be back here soon with an all-new episode of The Murder of My Family. And before you go, remember that every murder victim means something to somebody.